A literary classic, Dante's Purgatory still stands as one of the cultural masterpieces of not only his time, but humankind. In the second book of the Divine Comedy, we follow Dante on his quest of the mountain of Purgatory in an effort to reunite with his lover in heaven and cleanse his own sins along the way. Through the various levels of Purgatory, Dante talks to a variety of interesting characters. Of these, especially notable is his conversation with Marco Lombardo, a Venetian nobleman. In their short time together, Dante and Lombardo argue over what they call astrological determinism, which put simply is the idea that outside forces are responsible for our actions. Lombardo points out that if no one is responsible for their actions, then no one should be held liable, invalidating the very system of afterlife the book takes place in. Dante agrees and explains that we are all pure, but our choices determine how we die. This whole idea might be put best in the words of Shakespeare when he says, "The fault, dear Brutus, is not in the stars, but in ourselves." Taken from a modern perspective, what does free will mean to us? Even though centuries have passed, philosophers are still at odds at what free will is. Dante's process of thought is what we call libertarian free will. As a libertarian, you believe that we all have the free will of choice and thus are also entitled to the consequences. At the opposite side of the spectrum, we have hard determinism. The school of thought alleges that free will is non-existent and that we are all simply pawns to the laws of nature. While this might sound completely ridiculous and basically the opposite of everything, from our judicial system to our very society is built on, there's more merit to this idea than we may initially give it. Let's put it like this. You're playing a game of dominoes and you push one. It'll hit the next one, causing it to fall, pushing the next one, and so on and so forth. You expect it to fall. There is a cause and thus there must be an effect. So if we hold everything from dominoes to planetary motion accountable to the laws of nature, who are we to be the exception? This is in no way a new idea. Research more than 2 decades old has proposed that free will is nothing more than an illusion, and that every choice we make is simply dictated by chemicals in our brain. Dan Wegner and Talia Wheatley, the psychologists responsible for the classic study, put it like this. You buy a box of cereal, but you only really think of it as an intentional action after you've done it. So for your actions to have been intentional, some kind of back causation would have had to have been involved for your intentionality to be the cause and the consequence of your action. Psychologists Paul Bloom and Adam Baer furthered this idea in their 2016 study, where they put this idea to the test with a simple experiment. In the study, participants were shown 5 white circles on a computer monitor and were asked to pick which of the circles they thought would turn red. Which circle turned red was completely random, so the participants all had a 20% chance of choosing the correct one, but the actual results differed. When the color shifted quickly, participants reported their performance of choosing the corrected circle more than 30% of the times. But when the color shift to red was delayed, the correct circle choice dropped to the expected 20%. This data is indicative that the subconscious mind can easily trick us into thinking we are making a conscious choice, when in fact, we are simply being misled by our own brains. But why does our brain go to such lengths to make us believe this illusion? Scientists are still unsure, but some speculate that the brain's distortion is not simply a cognitive bug, but is in fact a key factor in our development of ideas of free will and, by consequence, motivating punishment. Right now, you may be thinking, if I am not technically in charge of my actions, can I even be held accountable for them? In fact, if we are never actually in control of anything we do, why do we even have to go to court or follow laws if I'm not actually the one making these choices? You're not alone. In a 2002 study, Kathleen Vaughns and Jonathan Schooler set out to find out not if free will was real, but how people would act knowing that it wasn't. One group of the participants read a paper arguing that free will was an illusion, and the other group read a paper that was neutral on the subject. After that, both groups participated in various tasks, such as taking a math test or taking $1 out of an envelope. The group that read the paper on the illusion of free will was more likely to cheat on the test and take more than the allotted $1 out. Vons and Schooler effectively proved that the issue may not just lie in the illusionary effect of free will, but what the repercussions this news could have for the general public. So, where does this leave us? I just told you that you have no free will, and that by telling you this, you're more likely to make bad choices. At this point, you either hate me or you're waiting for me to tell you something good. Well, I can't entirely negate that free will is an illusion. I can tell you that your actions do still have consequences. Enter Paul Bloom, a psychologist who argues that yes, hard determinism and libertarian free will are in fact compatible. He tells us to think of our brains as complex machines that, much like a computer, depend on the interior workings and environmental factors. Thus, while the inputs may be out of our reach, our brain is still the machine facilitating the process to make the output. Extending this analogy, if you sold a faulty machine-made product, you are still responsible for its consequences. In the words of the Stanford Freedom Project, our brain may be a machine, but it still belongs to us, and we should be held responsible for the judgments it computes. As Bloom puts it, we may never be able to escape causation, but we are still rational beings, and we need to accept the consequences of our actions. Centuries after the publication of the Divine Comedy, we're still arguing this question of free will. Dante maybe wasn't all right, but he was getting there. We may not be fully causing our actions, but we are still responsible for them. And at the end of the day, we are beings of metamorphosis, and it's hard to simply reduce us to a collection of electrical and chemical signals. The actual answer for where our free will lies is still, much like our brains, mostly a gray matter. Thank you.